Welcome back to the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. If you are new here, we are all about optimizing the health and performance of the ageless athlete. We have tons of different guests from the exercise, nutrition, and medical field. So if you're into that type of thing, please subscribe. In today's episode, Scotty Hagnes and I are breaking down exactly what you should be doing and what you should be considering prior to starting a high-intensity exercise routine. If you like today's podcast, please subscribe, rate, review, share with a friend, and enjoy this episode of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast. Scott, how goes it?
Great. Cracking along here.
Awesome. So I know, Scott, right after this, you're going to be meeting with a client, and it got me thinking because I actually was approached by a former client of mine, and I'll give you a little backstory here as to why this topic I think is important. So this client reached out to me again. I've worked with them in the past, and I've known them for probably close to like 7-8 years, maybe in some capacity. They're, a fairly transient individual who they'll be with the gym for a while and then they'll kind of leave for a little bit, but they periodically will come back and get back into it, get in a little bit better shape and then kind of leave. And then about a year ago, I started working more one-on-one individually with this individual. So that works one-on-one with them. And one of the things that we really honed in on and we're focusing on was stress management. Diet was pretty good. Exercise was pretty good. Just an enormous amount of stress this individual put on themselves, not only from family and relationships, but also work. So we worked individually for about 2 months, maybe a little longer. And then it kind of fizzled out a little bit because I think, maybe priorities change. Things are just a little too hectic. And we kind of parted ways. So this individual reached out to me actually yesterday. And I hadn't heard from them a little bit. And they said, "Hey, hope all is well. I just wanted to reach out to you because I actually had a heart attack." And I go, "Holy smokes." And this individual isn't that old, probably maybe late 40s, early 50s. And I was like, "Man, like tell me what happened." And so they went back to the gym. They went back to a CrossFit. We're doing a high intensity workout and got chest pain after the workout, was lying there like, "Whew, this is uncomfortable. This is uncomfortable." Like, okay, but I'm not exploding. They ended up driving home and getting lightheaded and pulling over and be like, "Listen, I think something's up." Reached out to a relative and they said, "Listen, pull over, call 911. So gets to the hospital eventually after being very, I'll just go home and take a shower, whatever. Turns out it's a heart attack, 80% blockage of one of the arteries of the heart. And then found 40% blockages in 2 others. So they did 3 stents in the heart, and now is on blood thinners and cholesterol management medications. And I sat down with the individual today, and we had a good conversation about like the second chance, so to speak, and about some of the interventions that we possibly can do, stress management stuff. But obviously, there are certain things that I can do as a coach and certain things that I feel more comfortable allocating out to something maybe like a therapist, which I think is appropriate in this instance. And then maybe honing in on some of the things like exercise and nutrition on a regular basis and just having someone there to hold him accountable. So this got me thinking, Scott, as coaches, what are some of the things that we see as red flags? And then maybe in addition to that, as we start to get into this conversation, what are some things that individual clients can see in themselves that might be cause for concern, as in either getting into a training regimen, being in a training regimen, or like coming out of it? So I'd love to get your thoughts first off the bat there, Scott.
Yeah. Wow. First of all, I've been in this a long time, and I think that's the first time I've heard of someone actually having a heart attack from a WOD. Yeah. I don't doubt it's happened before that. Just that I haven't run across it. So wow, that's gnarly. Some things I will check in with new folks, unless they're, on the younger end, is if they're on statin drugs, in particular if there's some element of CrossFit going to be involved, just because of the well-known connection with much greater susceptibility to rhabdo. So that tells me
wow.
things that I may or may not
Great
be able to do with them. Now I don't do a lot of real high intensity stuff with that many people. So again, it's not something I run across a lot, but when I had the gym going, it was certainly something we would check into more. And we would, in our intros, we would always talk about it. And then, it's as far as assessing, of course, usually an initial assessment is all the usual movement, how well does this person move and all that. But I do a health questionnaire, and I have, especially with people who are going to start with a more individual level, I have one, and it's sort of something I poached off James Fitzgerald years ago. And it basically is a question, energy levels through the day, how well do you sleep? So just some very basic questions. They're not medical questions and not nothing crazy, but usually you can see a pattern right there within someone. I think how much you sleep and subjective quality of sleep is a telling flag for an individual. That's the one thing that I think we can all very easily do to try and find that individual that's very high stress.
That's a great point there, Scott, because this individual in particular that I was talking about, one of the interventions that we had was like, he's like, I don't sleep. I have terrible sleep. So I was like, okay, first thing we want to do, set an alarm for 11 p.m. And that's it. Your day is over, get to bed. And again, obviously 11 p.m. you're like, oh, that's pretty like lenient there. I'm like, well, that's how little this person was sleeping. But to hear you say that like people who don't sleep, they're at higher risk. That's definitely, if you're listening to this now and you're like, oh, I sleep 4 or 5 hours a night, I would consider yourself at risk.
Yeah, especially if you're, honestly, 40 onward, you pretty much, right? Because you see it starts cropping up at that point.
Yeah.
And the statistics show that the earlier you have a cardiac issue, the worse it generally is. So that's one of the go-to red flags. And typically, if it's someone you're working with on an individual basis, or even if you're, coaching a group class and you're seeing the same folks, as you get to know them a little bit, usually in matters of casual conversation, you can start to kind of figure out some, lifestyle and, the more red flags for this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And just something to keep in mind.
Something that you hit on there, Scott, was obviously, you don't do a ton of high intensity training with individuals, especially if they're probably a little bit more advanced in age. Should someone, I guess the easiest way of saying that is, if you're older, should you be doing CrossFit?
Like everything, I think it depends. I think it's probably less of a good option in a lot of ways the older you are, both for, again, but it depends, right? If you've been doing relatively high intensity things, maybe you've been an endurance athlete for many years and you're going to do it, or you played field sports for ages, you still are in soccer rec leagues or something, then, I think maybe you're probably going to be fine. But if you're just haven't done anything, or you've been super sporadic and more inactive than active, it's probably maybe not the best thing.
Yeah.
Because as we know, to really reap the benefits of the high intensity work, you really need an aerobic base to be able to recover from it and do it well. Otherwise, it's just such a stressor on the body. You just don't recover that well. And then, of course, there's the whole movement quality side that generally the older you are, the more movement restrictions you're going to have. And a lot of the things in a typical CrossFit gym are going to require some pretty good range of motion through the whole body to be done well or safely. So a more targeted, individualized approach is probably, for most, again, depends, right? But
absolutely. And I think, like, as you explained that, Scott, I think that also brings up like red flag number 2. Are you advanced in age and deconditioned? If you're deconditioned and advanced in age, be very, very careful about getting back into high intensity exercise like that. Because if you're deconditioned, naturally your aerobic base is probably diminished. I think part of it will be that your blood pressure will get really high very quickly in high intensity exercise. But when you're aerobically deconditioned, your heart is deconditioned, right?
Yeah.
So now you're putting a shitload of pressure on your heart. Your heart is a muscle. If it's not ready to be able to take that stress, that could potentially lead to an episode, to something really going on here. And in looking at this individual, I'm pretty sure that's what happened. It's not the fact that this person had an 80% blockage on its own. It's like, oh, you didn't do anything for 3 months, went and did a few workouts, and you really push it on a workout, and all of a sudden that was too much for your heart to deal with.
Yeah. Surely he's had roughly that percentage of blockage for quite some time. Yeah. Probably during all the time you were working together, and even several years back at the gym, and building toward that didn't just happen. But yeah, and I honestly think you hit the nail on the head. The most at risk is, and I've seen this in lots of ways and lots of ages through the years, it's that person that does it and then stops for a while and comes back, because if they've done it long enough, they know the movement still, they know how to push, but their body can't do what they used to. But it's very difficult, even if they're back, oh, I'm just going to take it easy. Well, we know how the competitive group environment, and it's easy to get carried away. And even if you don't, it's still honestly very easy to push beyond your present means if you've been inactive. So that person is so much more at risk in a lot of ways than the person that actually is just starting out, because they don't know what the hell they're doing yet.
Yeah. There's natural governors that are in place, such as movement quality. So they're not able to push themselves because their body just doesn't know how to move and do the movements properly. They are afraid of the pain. So as soon as they start to feel the pain, that's a natural governor. You're absolutely right. It's a person who's experienced in CrossFit, who's deconditioned, who jumps into the deep end and gets bit by the shark.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess that's the red flag number 2, is if you're deconditioned, yet you have experience within the sport or the modality or the exercise regimen, just be very careful. And again, that's where having experienced coaches around you is so important. One of my clients says it's a long road up and a steep hill down. It is. It really is when it comes to your conditioning. So you take you train for a year and then you take a month off. Yeah. When you come back, it's going to suck, but that is perfectly fine. It's going to take some time to get back into it, but there's no finish line. Your fitness is not, if there's no finish line to your fitness.
Yeah. And I just wanted to throw out there too, is that this actually applies to pretty much every modality, not just CrossFit.
Oh, for sure.
You are an experienced runner, take a bunch of time off and come back, you're going to come back too hard. If you're just like lifting weights and then, bodybuilding or whatever, same thing, whatever it is.
Yeah. And again, I'm not throwing shade at CrossFit here. I don't think that's what my intent is here.
No. And I think you were.
What I'm alluding to is that it is one of the most popular high intensity modalities and exercise regimens out there. And the audience that listens to this probably does either some kind of CrossFit or some kind of functional high intensity training. So just be aware of that. Like if you're a more advanced age individual, maybe you take like a summer off because you're traveling and stuff. And you're like, oh, let me jump back into CrossFit. Just be aware for the first few weeks, get your feet back underneath you, get moving, sweat, feel good after workouts, trickle in a little bit of intensity. And if you don't know what you're doing, work with somebody who is there to hold your hand along the way and guide you and be able to give you the stimulus that you need while juxtaposing that with what you want, which is the beatdown-ish kind of thing. And then, oh, by the way, get yourself to the doctor on a regular basis. Whether that's just a general physical, whether you do have a functional medicine practitioner, if you have an 80% blockage, I'm guaranteeing that could be picked up either through blood markers. Obviously if you had like stress tests and EKGs and all that kind of stuff. And
they would be able to discern something like that.
For sure. There's another one where they could do like a radioactive dye and then take a scan of and see the actual blockages, which is how they diagnose blockages as it is. But if you have a family history of heart problems, do not mess around with this stuff. And anecdotally also, because again, everything kind of like all happens at once. And I think also, the 2 years of everybody being super stressed out, I think is just accelerating a lot of these things as is. But the bodybuilding world is actually going through some like catastrophic stuff in terms of like their top tier athletes, like having cardiac arrest at like not old people. I think the 2018 Olympia champion died of a heart attack, he died. I don't know what the causes actually were, but you look at them and you go, okay, that is the pinnacle of fitness, quote unquote. You have no idea what's going on your insides. And if you're not staying diligent on that shit, you may look at yourself in the mirror and go, oh, wow, I'm in the best shape of my life. You have no idea what's going on the inside.
Yeah. And of course, a year ago, we talked about this, I'm sure, a few times, but just the very firsthand example of how this can be is I know a lot of people in our audience are a little suspicious of the medical field and maybe don't go to the doctors. We kind of take stuff into our own hands. Yep. But, like the story of my head coach, right? And by all accounts, looked healthy, ate healthy, moved healthy, etc. But he just wasn't feeling well, just kept feeling worse and worse and worse and worse. But he refused to ever go to a doctor because it just wasn't what he did, and until he was finally coughing up blood. And by that point, he was deep into stage 4 cancer and he was gone in 6 months. So, yeah.
I think everybody,
checkups.
Yeah, everybody has a cautionary tale. It's just a matter of us just like slapping ourselves on the side of the head and just be like, dude, stop being so boneheaded and just go do it. So I think our last piece of advice is if you haven't been to a healthcare practitioner in the last year, go do it now. Go get your heart checked. Go get a basic blood panel. That will at least give you something. Like if your LDL cholesterol is through the roof and your C-reactive protein is through the roof, your A1C is through the roof, stop, get that shit together before you go, oh, I'm going to now do CrossFit to save my life. Like, no. Let's take this one step at a time. I know everybody wants to do the right thing and get themselves healthy by working out, and they think they can work themselves out to that point. But it's this incident has kind of left a very interesting taste in my mouth in the idea that like we're getting to the point now where like CrossFit is specifically is mainstream enough and that it's popular enough that I'm not going to be surprised when we see more of this going on, where people show up after being away for a couple months and because of the stress of the world, because of the stress of changing in lives and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see this a little bit more often, especially in places where they don't have measures in place to ease people back into it, to like you said, let's do an basic intake form and that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And some places don't have the beginner or lower intensity classes. You can kind of ease your way in. It's, feet straight to the fire right out of the gate.
Yeah. And again, it makes you appreciate the coaches that are actually doing their due diligence and really do have the capacity to care on that level for individuals. And I know you're one of them, Scott. So it's a good segue into asking you, how do we work with Scott Hagnes?
Well, you can reach out to me, scotthagnestraining@gmail.com, Scott Hagnes Training on Instagram, or you could always go to my website and there's a form there as well. Definitely, if you're looking for individual training or anything like that, I would jump in because I'm very, very near my capacity right at the moment. So
that's good. That's good, Scott. And if you'd like to work with me in person down in South Florida or remotely, I offer one-on-one training and nutrition coaching. Flochfitness.com, Floch Fitness on Instagrams and all the social media kind of stuff. I have a program coming out at the end of the month. We're putting our final touches on that. So stay tuned, join the email list so you can get the early bird access there, because I think I'm going to only probably take like 20 people for this little program that we're going to be doing. So Scott, I appreciate your time, brother.
Awesome. Absolutely. Yes.
I'll see you
Talk to you next week.
Take care.
All right.
Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you like what you heard, please go online and give us a 5-star review. It helps grow the podcast more than you know, and it's free to you. If you haven't already, please subscribe, share with a friend, and we'll see you next time with a brand new episode of the Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity Podcast.